Well, it's been a bomb buster weekend, actually. We have, of course, the Alec Baldwin case that was dismissed with prejudice. And on top of that, the attempted assassination of the former president. Well, we're going to talk about that and a whole lot more on today's Charlie Crime Buster. What some people are calling, well, they're calling it the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals interviewed or participating and do not represent those of Charlie Crime Buster nor Peacemaker Network. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener and viewer discretion is advised. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to remind you that we have a YouTube channel. You can reach out to youtube.com/@CharlieCrimeBuster. And you can also reach us at charliecrimebuster.com. And if you have suggestions or any ideas that you would like to share or any comments, it's an open forum here where we welcome comments and suggestions and even ideas and even remarks and even disagreeing with what we have to say here on the show. You can do that by sending an email to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. All right. Well, what an interesting week and weekend we had indeed.
Yeah, we call that reaching out to us, reaching out with a shout out, right, James?
That's what we call it.
Yeah, just shout out to us. We'd be glad to hear from our folks.
Well, our focus this week is to respond to the bombshell that was dropped on Friday with the Alec Baldwin trial this past week. But we cannot ignore that former President Donald Trump was almost killed over the weekend by a sniper. You have any thoughts on this, Charlie?
Wow, you talk about the elephant in the room, right? I mean, I don't see how we could even jump right into our podcast without taking a moment. I think the whole country took a moment and just took a big, deep breath, because it is a miracle, nothing short of a miracle, that former President Donald Trump was not assassinated. If he had not turned his head at that point, I'm sure that this would be a whole different dialogue. But there are some things. I mean, this whole show, today's show, is not all about the assassination, but I think it is certainly a crime, and certainly something that people are interested in. Three things came to my mind. The first thing, James, I thought was, wow, how courageous those Secret Service agents were that jumped on that stage. I mean, it so instantaneously, not even one bit of hesitation.
Nope.
To put their bodies in front of former President Trump to take a bullet.
Yeah, live rounds.
Yeah, I mean, that's literally what they did. They covered his body with their bodies, and they moved so quickly that I just have to say that for that part of the Secret Service that was there around that stage and how quick they responded, I thought was miraculous. I also thought there's certainly some other problems that we'll talk about, but I also thought that once the perpetrator, the sniper, was found, the Secret Service did their job in neutralizing the threat. There are some gigantic problems. I mean, people today are all shaking their head.
Huge.
How in the world could someone get on a rooftop 130 yards from the former president and be able to get up there and to actually fire a rifle without him being stopped? I mean, it blows my mind, James. I mean, this is a serious security breach, and there's going to be hearings, and they ought to be hearings, and they got to get to find out what happened. But it was a serious breach, and so it's something that has to be fixed. It absolutely has to be fixed.
He was a person of interest for 3 hours. 3 hours. A person of interest for 3 hours.
Yeah, and I get, that they didn't maybe have any probable cause to arrest him or anything, but they certainly could have brought him around for questioning, and they could have put an agent staying with him the whole time. And then also, I mean, how in the world could people, ordinary citizens, see this guy climbing on the roof and the Secret Service not see him?
Exactly. Well, the local authorities are supposed to have someone on that roof to begin with. That was actually part of the prior plan.
Yeah, well, that's the third thing. I have a little different take on that. I believe the Secret Service actually responds to this as a smokescreen. They're trying to blame it on the local police when actually, I was listening to the commissioner today. The local police role in this whole thing was to handle traffic in and out. That was their role. It is still the Secret Service's job to protect the person they're protecting. And the commissioner mentioned, that one of the police officers was alerted, and even though their job was traffic, their job was not to protect the president, although any officer would, of course. He said that they even, hosted up a guy on top of the roof to look at him. And of course, I certainly don't blame this officer. I mean, this officer had two hands on the roof, stuck his head up, and the guy pointed a rifle at him. No way he could get to his gun. In fact, he tried to and fell back and injured himself.
Right.
Because the bottom line is, it is the Secret Service job to protect the target, and they did not do that. I mean, any Secret Service should know that they may say they depend on local police. They do for the backup, but basically those are traffic situations. You don't take a police officer and expect him to do the work of a Secret Service officer.
That's true.
That place should have been mapped out beforehand. That threat should have been very, I mean, how ridiculous is this? The head of the Secret Service said, well, one of the reasons why we didn't have anybody up there, it was a slanted roof. Well, so what if it's a slanted roof?
Yeah.
I mean, that's ridiculous.
Most roofs are. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I mean, that's ridiculous. Slanted roof. I don't care what kind of roof it is. If it's a place where someone can get and take a shot at the target that they're protecting, then the Secret Service should be there. So
there's even public video out
his role on this.
Yeah, there's even public video out that shows people were hollering, "He's got a gun! He's got a gun!" But yet, local authorities weren't responding to that potential threat. Yeah. And then when they did go to respond after he did get the shot off, they were blocked in. They had to use a car to ram the fence down to get out.
Yeah, it was a fiasco, no doubt about that. Now the thing that I think that is interesting to me that I still have some thought about, and I know that this is all going to come out more as the investigation goes, but it's interesting to me, James, that the shooter's parents had actually contacted law enforcement,
right,
and said that he was missing.
Right.
Now, the thing that stands out to me in that is he wasn't missing that long. I mean, he left and supposed to be back at 1 o'clock, wasn't back at 1 o'clock. Who do you know? What parent do you know that would say their child did not show up at 1 o'clock, and didn't come in at that time? Who would call the police and call them missing? That doesn't make any sense.
A 20-year-old.
I think they had an idea that he was up to something. I mean, why else would you call the police? I mean, that just doesn't make sense that a 20-year-old person is 2 or 3 hours late and you're calling the police and saying they're missing. So I'm just wondering, I can't say for a fact, I'm wondering if maybe these parents may have known more about this than they let on, that there may have been some signs there that this guy was having some problems that caused them fear to contact the police so quickly.
We may hear more on this, I'm sure. Coming
but isn't that a little odd?
It's very odd. I mean,
and I haven't seen anybody really pick up this fact and run with it, but it's just odd to me that you would call the police when your son's been missing for 3 hours. Because usually, a 20-year-old can go anywhere he wants to go, and they don't usually show up. They're not mainly that punctual all the time, so. I'm just thinking that they were afraid that he's been doing something maybe with these weapons, and plus what they found some bomb making material at the house
and in his car. Yeah.
Could the parents not see this? And it's something like we say all the time here at Charlie Crime Buster. If you see something,
say something. Absolutely.
And I'm wondering if maybe they did say something, but maybe it was a little too late, you know.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
And
one.
getting back to that thing on the roof thing that I heard today too, that I thought was really interesting, because everybody wants to blame people, and certainly there's blame at the Secret Service on this.
Mhm.
But the sheriff of that department, who was actually taken up for that police officer who tried to crawl up on there and saw that rifle looking at him, he said, "You know what?" He said, "That act alone probably saved former President Trump's life,
Yep.
because he delayed at that point. He delayed shooting. Had he not been delayed, he might have shot the president when he was not looking away, and
Right.
when his head was in the full target. So just
Exactly.
really, I mean, you know, I, I have heard so often the word divine intervention, and I believe it certainly was in that situation. But you know, maybe we'll have another program on this. But I did think that we ought to take a little moment, some time to at least talk a little bit about what happened there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, getting into our topic now, which is
Sure.
following this Sunday's podcast, you talked about the Alex Baldwin bombshell trial. So what happened there?
Yeah, our podcast this past Sunday was the Alec Baldwin bombshell trial, and it
Hmm.
was a bombshell. I mean, you know, we took a survey, you remember,
We did.
and well, 52% of the people thought that he would be found guilty.
Right.
I think 22% said not guilty, and then we had some undecided and that sort of thing. But you know, one thing that nobody said, you and I didn't talk about it.
Nope.
Nobody expected that this case would be dismissed before the end of the first week of the trial.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
what happened was that the judge dismissed it because the prosecution, according to the judge, withheld Brady material from the defense.
So now
And so that was what they dismissed it.
what does the Brady violation mean, though?
Well, the Brady violation, it's called a violation of the Brady Doctrine, and it was basically based on there was a 1963 Supreme Court ruling, and it required that the prosecution would disclose any information favorable to the defense.
Mm-hmm.
And when prosecutors withhold evidence that they are duty bound to turn over, according to the ruling, it undermines the Constitution, that everybody deserves a fair trial. And the Supreme Court's case law, of course, backs that up. And that's exactly what happened in this situation.
So it was 1963.
He actually dismissed it with prejudice.
Right. You said it was 1963. Was that after the Kennedy assassination?
Yeah, I think it was somewhat. Yeah, after that, I don't know whether it was related to the Kennedy assassination. It actually wasn't. It was related to a name of Brady, but it's certainly something that's every prosecutor knows about the Brady ruling, and they're very careful not to violate that. Except in this case, they were not so careful, and so it was dismissed with prejudice.
Right. So, and you mentioned that that the case was dismissed with prejudice. What exactly does that mean for those that don't understand?
Well,
the legal term.
You can dismiss a case, and then a good example is Alec Baldwin. Remember early on in this case, in this whole situation, right after Melina Hutchinson died, not too long after that, they actually brought charges against Alec Baldwin, but then they dropped those charges. They dismissed those charges, but now they brought it back again, right?
Right.
But that's because the court can decide to dismiss it, or the prosecutor can decide to drop the charges and everything and bring it back, unless the judge rules with prejudice. Means that because of the evidence that was withheld, it was prejudice against the defendant. And so they actually, when they say, okay, we're going to dismiss this with prejudice, it literally means that he cannot be tried for this again. So they can't, 30 days from now, bring charges against him for the same crime. I mean, it's just like he wasn't pronounced not guilty. I'm not saying that he's pronounced not guilty, but the results is just like not guilty. It would be double jeopardy for them to bring charges again. So he is free to go. So, I mean, this was a really, really huge ruling by the judge.
Was she she had to rule on this quite clearly when she made the statement about it being dismissed. Do you think that she acted correctly when she made this ruling?
Yeah, I really do. In fact, she had some pretty strong words. I was looking at the other day. She said basically, there is no way for the court to right this wrong. This was District Judge Mary Marlowe, and she went on to say the sanction of dismissal is the only warranted remedy. And then she said that if this, and get this is a quote, if this conduct does not rise to the level of bad faith, it certainly comes so near to bad faith as to show signs of scorching. And
Wow.
scorching is a legal term that means that the prosecution is acting as close to bad faith as you possibly could, so close that it's like a fire that would scorch.
Wow. Wow. So do you think that the act of the prosecution was done on purpose by just, withholding this evidence?
I mean, we can't. Well, I just tell you, yeah, I do, and I'll tell you, it's clear that they really messed up big time. Either they messed up big time or they were really, really incompetent, and I don't believe that they were incompetent in this. And I'll tell you why I believe that, because not only did they not bring this before the defense as they should have and disclosed it, but they actually took the evidence and hid it under another file number, another case number. So there is not only the idea here that they withheld the evidence, they actually hid the evidence by taking it out of the Rust trial and putting it under another file.
So they buried it.
Yeah, they basically buried it. And that shows me that they were afraid for the defense to get this, because if the defense had gotten it, then it would have caused, of course, some problems with the case. It didn't mean that the case would be dismissed. It doesn't even mean that Baldwin would get free with this or would be declared innocent. We don't know. We'll never know. But we do know this, that they were so determined that that the defense did not get this material that they hid it away under another file.
But before all this was disclosed, do you think that before this actual bombshell was released, do you really think that the defense was winning the trial, or do you think it was the prosecutor?
Well, it's really interesting, and I think we pointed this out the other week too. The judge always says to the jurors, "Do not discuss this case. Wait until all the evidence is in."
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, we're not going to have an opportunity to have all the evidence in because the case has been dismissed. But at the very, very prior to the trial this week, I was leaning really toward the prosecution. But after I heard the attorneys for the defense, I really believe that the defense was winning, because this attorney that he had, man, on his cross-examination, I think he's one of, I think I said this for the other trial we had, but I think this guy was one of the best I've ever heard at cross-examination. He was extremely good, and he was really, I think, throwing a lot of reasonable doubt out there, with that.
Right.
In fact, when it gets down to it, I think at that point now, but keep in mind, we were way too early in the trial to really know. I mean, he was just right now. He was just talking to the law enforcement personnel that they would brought before it. There was a lot more to come down the line. They had not even been able to introduce some of the reckless behavior of Alec Baldwin that they were going to introduce before the jury.
Ah, but during the podcast, you also mentioned something about courage on Sunday. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, we actually called this a courageous citizen. When this was really, really interesting. Now, I will say, when the prosecution started their case, they actually had, I think, a very, very strong opening. The attorney was Campbell Johnson, and I think she really, really did an extremely good job. But interesting enough, she had come to the trial a little late in the game, and she too, just like you and me and all the country, had not heard about this violation, this Brady violation. And so she actually heard it the same time that we heard it as it was brought out. And when she heard it, she was really, really concerned about it. And she came before the prosecution team and she said, "This is wrong. This should not have happened. We need to dismiss the case." And I'm just wondering, James, if they had dismissed the case, the prosecution at that point, maybe, just maybe, I don't know, but maybe it could have been dismissed without prejudice and they could have come back. But the other part of the prosecution team, they did not want to go that way. They wanted to fight this in court. And so they had the hearing on the Brady material. But she was so convicted about this and thought that this was so wrong that actually at lunchtime during the trial on Friday, she actually quit. She walked off. And, to stand up against your team like that and say, "Hey, I don't believe in what you're doing is right. I believe that we were in violation of Brady material, and it undermines the Constitution. It's not giving this person a fair trial, whether he's guilty or not. It's not giving him a fair trial, and I will not be a part of it." And she walked away. I think that takes real courage. It's easy to stand up to your enemies.
Oh,
James,
yeah.
it's even harder to stand up to your friends.
Absolutely. Co-workers too. Yeah. The
Yeah,
team.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was extremely courageous for her to do that.
So she actually recused herself from the entire case altogether.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, she quit.
Oh, she quit.
She had to get permission from the judge.
Oh, of course.
And
Yeah.
she went and judged and told the judge she wanted to withdraw, and the judge did. And I know that the judge has to look at the facts of the case, and I believe they did, but that could not have helped the prosecution that she quit. I'm sure the judge is thinking, if this person on their team is so convicted by this and has such a strong belief about this, there must be something for us to look into. And so she really took a careful look into it. And I knew that things were going the other side when the judge herself put on blue gloves and took those bullets out of that bag to look at them, to see if they were similar indeed, as the defense had said, and really came to the conclusion that they were similar, and they should have been. And here's the thing, the prosecution was saying basically that they did not believe that those bullets were a part of the same batch, and so they did not believe that it had any type of would not assist the defense in any way. The problem is that's not up to the prosecution to decide that. That's up to the defense to decide that, whether that would have been used in their case or not. And so the prosecutor in this particular situation, I think, gave herself way too much leeway in thinking she should decide that. What she should have done is say, "Let's turn it over to the defense. If it is there, it is, or if it isn't, it isn't." But the proper thing is turn it over to the defense,
Right. So, but even regardless of the bombshell, going into the case and based on what you heard from the prosecution and also the defense, at the end of the day, if you were on the jury, how do you think you would have voted? Guilty or not guilty?
Well, James, I'll tell you, based on what I heard, and we didn't hear all of it, so again, this is premature. But based on what I heard at this point, prior to the trial, if you would have asked me this, I would say guilty. But after what I heard, I'm going to have to say not guilty, because even though he did violate the cardinal rules of handling the weapon, keep in mind that it's different on a movie set, because the responsibility of keeping that set safe is not up to the actor.
That's right.
It's up to the first assistant director and the armorer. The armorer is responsible for making sure those weapons are safe. And so that weapon was checked, or was supposed to be checked, by two other people before it even got into Alec Baldwin's hand. And, if I'm handling a weapon, I don't have two people checking it, handing it over to me and saying it's safe. That's why it's important for me to follow those cardinal rules. That's why it's important to me to never point it, to never do that. But, this is an actor. and an actor shoots the weapon. An actor runs around shooting the guns. I mean, you look at these movies that we see. I mean, they're shooting things all over the place.
That's right. Right.
So the actor is doing their job. Their job is to act. Now, I do hope that after this has happened, that the industry may even maybe increase some of the safety measures and maybe get to the point that they say to actors that, there's a third level here. We had the first person, the second person, the third person, and maybe they get to the point that they would have three people checking it, and maybe they will get to the point that the rules never point the weapon. Assume it's all loaded on. Maybe that will be followed in the future. But at this point, it was not the actor's responsibility to make sure that gun was safe. It was the armorer and the first director. Now, both of those have been convicted of doing that, and so I think it was. So I really think this was a far reach by the prosecution. And Baldwin is not my favorite actor. I got to tell you that. I'm not a fan. I am not a fan of him. But he deserves a fair trial, and he deserves fair treatment. And I do not believe that. I believe there's enough doubt there, reasonable doubt, that if I was on the jury, I would vote not guilty based on what I know. How about you?
I up till now, based upon what I've had heard, and also how the defense posed their opening statement and how they conducted themselves. I mean, I think Luke Nichols did a fantastic job in framing exactly what he believed was the what happened on the set, and I think he basically played out to the jury exactly what Alex's role was, and that it, as you stated, the first attendant and also the first assistant, rather, and the armorer were the ones responsible for handling the weapon before it got into Alex's hands. And I have to agree with you there. I think that was one of the reasons why they were both convicted, but he should not have been held responsible for handling a gun that should have been checked twice.
It's really a sad case. This person should not have had to die. And even let's take a moment to go back to what we started this whole program with. There was a man that was killed in this situation with former President Trump, and two others gravely wounded. And I don't think we need to forget about these people. These are people. They have families, and they've all died way too young. The man that died at that rally died a hero. I mean, he was actually using his body to shield his family when he was killed. So I mean, I hope that always on our coverage of these terrible, terrible crimes, that we never get to the point that we don't forget that this impacts real people and real lives, with that. So I just wanted to point that out. But yeah, I do believe. Now I will say this too. I don't know how much money Alec Baldwin paid his attorneys, but they were worth every penny of it. They really came through for him.
They did.
And the sad part about that is, and I'm not saying this to disparage Baldwin, but there are people out there that deserve that same kind of defense, but unfortunately they don't get it because they don't have the money to do that. So our justice system, James, is not a perfect system, but it is still the best in the world.
I agree.
And we all got improvement on it, and hopefully we can improve as the days go. I think there's a couple other lessons that we want to point out to our folks, and that is number one, that you do have to be careful handling weapons, that they're very, 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 very dangerous, and whether you have a weapon at home or whether you're out hunting or you're out on a shooting range or you're carrying a concealed weapon, you need to understand there's a lot of responsibility there, and that you have a weapon that can cause harm and actually take lives. The second lesson that I would like to point out to our listeners is, remember, as we started out, if we see something, we ought to say something. Because right now, our country is in a situation. What really scares me, James, is if you remember when President Kennedy was shot, as history tells us, there became a whole string of assassinations. Remember,
Mm-hmm.
there was Martin Luther King, and then
Right.
right after that there was, the other
Rob,
Kennedy.
Robert F.
and
Kennedy.
and and I'm just praying that we don't see this same thing take off. That uh, it's called copycats, and
Right.
sometimes it happens. You'll hear of even suicide when one person commits suicide in a school. Immediately, you get on the alert because there could be other people who that puts a thought in their mind. So let's just say to our audience out there that regardless of where you are or what you're doing, if you see something that could cause pain or could save lives, please, for goodness sakes, say something. Be courageous, like these people we've mentioned today.
Right. Right. Now, based upon this bombshell that was dropped for Alex Baldwin and the case being dismissed, I understand that Hannah Gutierrez Reed has actually filed an appeal asking for the same treatment. What's your thoughts on that?
That's right. She has. I don't know that she'll get it. I think a lot has to do, and I was trying to look this up, but I didn't get time to do so. A lot has to do with what time that evidence was actually brought to the sheriff's office, and I don't recall, James, whether it was brought there during the trial or after the trial.
Mm-hmm.
But if it was brought there during the trial and it wasn't disclosed, it could be. I'll say for one thing, it this sure doesn't hurt her chances. If anything,
Right.
it will help her chances, in that area. Of course, the challenge of this whole thing is for her is by the time they get through all the appeals and this sort of thing, her sentence probably will almost be over. Because
Yeah.
it's not a long sentence. So I don't know how that'll play out unless the attorney, works for an emergency relief. If he works for emergency relief, may it be granted. But that'd be something for us to keep our eye on, right?
Yeah, that's true. Now she was actually put into jail for 18 months, right?
Yeah, 18
Is she-
months, but you got to remember there's time already served.
okay.
And then on top of that,
Good behavior.
you get good behavior, you get
Mm-hmm.
time off on that, and sometimes there are other ways that they can, shorten that sentence, and it might be, it might be that you turn around and let's say that she does get her conviction, say, removed. Then at this point, the prosecution they could file charges. I don't think it will by any chance be dismissed for prejudice. It may be set aside, but then you got to think about, does the prosecution want to go through this again? do,
Mm-hmm.
do they
Mm-hmm.
do they want to embarrass themselves again? To because
Yeah.
if there's another trial, it's going to come out again.
Sure.
It's going to show the mistakes that the prosecution made in this, and they're glaring mistakes.
They are. They
They're
are.
glaring mistakes, and it may be that the prosecution says, we've had enough of it. She went to jail for how long she went. We're gonna take that as a win and go with it.
Right. So what's on our podcast for this Sunday?
Well, I'm watching very closely this investigation of the Secret Service.
Right.
This is that's pretty important. So I think, well, unless some other bombshell hits us, and we never know, I'm thinking we're going to revisit, take a look at the Secret Service. Because I think that's something that affects all of us because our leaders. And it scares me to death of you've heard today about Iran who have a whole list of people
Yep.
that they're wanting to assassinate and
Yep.
this sort of thing. So I think we're going to take a look at that. I think our audience would be very interested in knowing what's going on in those areas.
Well, I know that they're asking for the Secret Service chair, Kimberly Cheadle, to resign.
Yes, they are. They're pretty well demanding it. I don't know how that's going to come out, but that's the way it goes. What, the buck stops here, right?
That's right.
If you're the top of it, it can really. But I just want to know one thing, boy. These are egregious. This breach is very, very serious.
It is.
I just, if you were to tell me that this would have happened with the Secret Service, I would have laughed at you. No way,
Yep.
no way you could have a roof 130 yards away and not have that roof covered.
That's
At
right.
least have somebody who was if they weren't on the roof, they were assigned to watch that roof and see if anything happened on that roof so they could react quickly. That didn't happen.
Nope.
You know, no doubt about it.
Well, you and I both know in the line of business that we've been in is that just any threat that gets one shot off is one shot too many.
Exactly. Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt about it.
All right. Take us out, John.
All righty, folks. Thank you for joining James and I as we talk today about this assassination attempt on the former president. And also, we brought you some more information about the James Baldwin trial that was dismissed with prejudice. Join us for our next podcast as we continue to talk about this terrible, terrible tragedy that happened over the weekend, with one man losing his life, two other people seriously injured in the line of fire, and almost the assassination of the Republican candidate for president of the United States. So until next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, stay safe, stay alert. Yep, for the life you save, it could be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. You can find additional podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. You can also support our first responders, military, and law enforcement communities at peacemakernetwork.com, or subscribe to our YouTube channel using tag @CharlieCrimebuster. Even visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/CharlieCrimebuster. Or if you would like to make suggestions for future podcasts, please send your ideas to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us next week for another exciting crime story with Charlie Crimebuster.